It's not unusual for people to think of diversity and inclusion as promising one thing and delivering something else. Problem is, it's something they don't want. I'm Dr. Jonathan. I work with organizations to make them inclusive, and I'm on a mission to help 1 million people like you to make your workplace inclusive. Get your pen and paper ready, because we're talking about the Trojan Horse problem of diversity and inclusion. The what? The Trojan Horse problem of diversity and inclusion. I've waited a while to share this one, and I'm confident that you've encountered this in real life. It's the 21st century, and many of us have had an email or a text message which was a Trojan horse, and it positioned itself as one thing, but it was actually something more sinister. You're probably familiar with the tale of the Trojan Horse. It's a well-known story. I read about it as a kid in Homer's classic, the Iliad. It's from Greek mythology, but the Trojan horse has become a symbol of cunning and, in particular, deception. You know the story. During the Trojan War, the Greeks were besieging the city of Troy for 10 years. Now, Troy was famous for having impenetrable walls. This was taking its toll, so the Greeks came up with a plan. Well, they say Odysseus came up with the plan, but the Greeks disappeared from the battlefield and they left a massive wooden horse at Troy's gates. Now, the Trojans thought that the Greeks had quit, and they'd left this as an offering, either to the gods or to them, depends on who you speak to, but that's not the point here. The point is, this looked like a gift. So the Trojans brought the horse inside the city walls as a symbol of victory. What the Trojans didn't know was that inside the horse were Greek soldiers. At night, when everyone was asleep, these soldiers emerged, opened the gates, and then Troy fell. That's a brutal story. But what's that got to do with inclusion? Well, there are people who think that diversity, equity, inclusion are Trojan horses. There are people who think of them as a symbol of cunning and deception. There are people who think that it positions itself as one thing when it's actually something more sinister. For example, I spoke to several clients in the past week. Some people thought that diversity in recruitment meant lowering standards. Some people thought that anti-racist culture meant anti-white culture. Some people thought that gender parity in boardrooms meant that you were punishing men. Now here's a really deep cut from an early episode of the show. Actually, it was the pilot episode of the show. I spoke about the then Chairman of Tesco, Allan, who suggested that white men were an endangered species in UK boardrooms. For me, this is a great example of the Trojan Horse problem of diversity and inclusion. People think that you're talking about one thing, which from the outside it may even look great, even if you don't completely understand it. But inside is something sinister, something you don't want. And by accepting the first thing, you're opening yourself up to the second thing. And it's something that you think can harm you. If people think this is a problem in your organization. And I want to distinguish this from the old bait and switch. And maybe I'll do a whole show on this anyway. I learned about the bait and switch when I was a kid too. It happened a lot in marketplaces. For example, you would have a trader and they would say, we're selling household items, you pay £100 for whatever is in the bag. No refunds, no returns, cash only. Let's look at what's inside the bag. Here's a toaster, here's a kettle, here's a set of steak knives, here's a toolkit, here's a set of cutlery. They put it in the bag and then they say, who wants what's in the bag? Everyone goes wild and then they get a crowd around them. Someone gets a bag full of goodies and so they do it again. Then they do it again. Then they say, look, we need to go. We've got 30 bags and then we're out of stock. Who wants one for £100? Once again, everyone goes wild. But here's the thing. These bags are really difficult to open. And when you get home, either it's full of useless junk or the toaster, the kettle, the steak knives, all of that stuff, they're just super cheap quality. It's not the ones that were advertised. It was a bait and switch. They baited you with one thing and then they switched it for another. People feel as if there's nothing they can do. Don't forget, no refunds, no returns, cash only. It's a scam. And this is a true story. I saw this a lot when I was growing up as a kid. But I'm saying this to exaggerate the point. I don't think of this as a Trojan horse problem because you're being presented with something that's not what they said. There was a misrepresentation. The Trojan horse is when you get one thing, but you also get something else that you don't want. In any case, the real question is, why does this happen? I found from speaking to clients that it's typically three things. One, they got burned. Someone pulled a Trojan horse on them in the past. They don't want that to happen again. They feel really sore about it. And typically what I find that means is that they had an initiative that wasn't properly executed and it came along with something else that they didn't want, that someone had to kind of shoehorn in to make it fit. They don't want that to happen again. Two, you haven't made a compelling case. The people responsible for inclusion in your workplace are trading on their authority or the backing of leaders. But what they're saying themselves isn't compelling enough for you to take an interest. This means they lack genuine buy-in, and this means they have to take shortcuts in order to make it look good in the short term. And three, mainstream diversity narratives are stronger than you are. This is a really awkward one. I read social media every day, and if diversity at work was like what I saw online, I'm not sure I'd want it where I work either. The way that diversity, equity, inclusion is presented on social media can be quite intimidating and in some ways unattractive. And so the problem is sometimes you may have it right. What I mean is, let's suppose that in your workplace there's an idea that's appropriate, it's compelling, it makes sense in your organization. People don't buy into that. Why? Because they're paying greater attention to people that aren't you, that aren't your leaders. They're looking for guidance from people outside the organization who don't have your best interests at heart. In their mind, those voices are stronger than your voice. And these things are indicative of one of the three biggest problems that organizations experience on their inclusion journey, and that's people. Organizations have trouble engaging the people that they want to include. People just don't buy it. That's why we like evidence-based inclusion. This is all about making better decisions using the best evidence available, and I've learned it's prudent to gather evidence from multiple sources. 1, the scientific literature. 2, the organization you work in. 3, the stakeholders affected by the issues. And 4, professional expertise, yours and other people's. When you take all of this together, this helps you to address people's misgivings. This helps you to make a compelling case. This helps you to become stronger than the mainstream diversity narratives. This is what we do with our clients, and it makes a huge difference. Diversity and inclusion involves dealing with a lot of problems. I don't want this to be one of yours. So let's wrap this up. What are the key messages here? The Trojan Horse problem of diversity and inclusion means 1, people think they're going to get something hidden that they don't want. 2, people think they're going to open themselves up to something sinister. And 3, people think that's going to be the end of everything. So what do you think? Have you encountered the Trojan Horse problem? Get in touch or leave a message. I would love to hear from you. If you've learned something from today's show, then give us a 5-star review and a comment wherever you're listening to the podcast. It helps other people like you to find the show. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.